Okay, hi friends. I'm Wei Zhang from Tsinghua University in Beijing. It's too bad that I cannot meet you guys in person. One thing is because I'm teaching a summer course in August, and another thing is because of the quarantine measures in Beijing. So basically, all overseas arrivals in Beijing will be kept in quarantine in isolated, centralized isolation for 7 days and followed by a 3-day self-isolation. So that would be too inconvenient. So, but it's good that we can meet online. So let me start my presentation. The topic is regulated market trapped. Please let me just maybe stop video so that my voice can be more smooth. Okay. The topic is regulated market trapped workers, the impact of formalization on China's online ride-hailing industry. I have two co-authors, Qi Hao from Renmin University of China and Li Zhongjin from University of Missouri, Kansas City. So on October 2015, China's Ministry of Transport published draft rules that would formalize China's online ride-hailing industry. So it has always been illegal in China for private cars to operate as taxis. And the proposed regulatory framework in 2015 would recognize the legal existence of the car hailing industry by requiring each online ride-hailing driver to be licensed. The advantage of platform economy is obvious. The biggest advantage is that it could bring a lot of job opportunities. So why the municipal government need to regulate ride-hailing platform economy in China? The reason is that the ride-hailing economy requires two dimensions of space to grow, competing spaces. So one is the infrastructure space. It needs roads and parking facilities, but that would lead to traffic congestion, air pollution. In an official document, the Beijing Municipal Commission of Transportation actually linked the sudden deterioration of Beijing's traffic condition in 2015 to the rapid expansion of ride-hailing industry. And also, in terms of the market space, the growth of the online ride-hailing platforms poses a serious threat to the traditional taxi industry. Actually, in China, it has already provoked taxi driver strikes and protests across China. So in the end, the municipal governments decided to apply a regulatory framework which mimics to a great extent the existing one that governs the traditional taxi industry. So the research question here is that how these platform regulations focusing on market formalization have shaped China's online ride-hailing platforms and workers' well-being. And we find that the platforms in China aligned with third-party car rental companies to provide licensed vehicles, and that enabled drivers to have licensed vehicles. But on the other hand, drivers find themselves trapped by car loans and rents, and they end up working longer hours and bearing with lower wage rates. So that's basically our the story. So our the method and data, our analysis is based on Didi Chuxing. I just mentioned that, which has captured 80% of the market in China since the acquisition Uber in 2016. There's an acquisition of Uber, Uber's China operation by Didi, and we conducted questionnaire surveys of over 600 ride-hailing drivers, and we also conducted deep interviews of 40 drivers. We did the surveys in both Nanjing and Beijing, two big cities in China, and we did that in July 2018, June 2019, July 2019, and July 2020. And this 3-year period allows us to observe the transition of the industry. So this is the characteristics of the interviewed drivers. So it shows that a typical Didi driver was about 40 years old, male, married, and had about 1.3 kids on average. Let me see. And in Nanjing, sorry, I cannot see this. Okay. In Nanjing, about 40% of the drivers came from the rural area, while in Beijing, 67% had rural origins, and overall 61% of drivers were migrants. And in Beijing, this figure was much higher. It was 78%. And about 40% of the drivers had a junior high education, 39% had a senior high school or secondary vocational education, and 20% had a college or tertiary vocational education. And about 58% of Didi ride-hailing drivers had no access to social security. And in Beijing, this cohort, this rate was even higher, 63%. And these characteristics suggest that the Didi drivers are facing the living cost for raising a 3 or 4 member family, but their economic capacity is constrained by their education level, their migrant background, the lack of formal support from the welfare state. Okay, so let's look at the detailed municipal government's regulation in these two cities. So the regulations stipulate stipulated by the two cities share a common element, which is a requirement for double licenses, which means it requires a online ride-hailing driver license, and also it requires a online ride-hailing vehicle license. So we have a special driver license and also special vehicle license. In order to get an online ride-hailing driver license, you have to have first a local residency. So local residency is required in both cities, but the requirements in Beijing is more stringent, because in Beijing it requires a local permanent residency, which is very difficult to get. In Nanjing, it requires a local residence permit only, and it is easy to obtain. And also, in order to apply for an online ride-hailing vehicle license, you have to have a local license plate. You have to have a local license plate. And this is extremely difficult to get in Beijing in practice, because since 2011, the Beijing municipal government has employed a lottery system that limits the number of license plates issued each year. So the lottery winning rate is like 1 in 600. So it's very difficult since 2011 to get a Beijing license plate, which makes the qualification becomes very difficult. Although the regulations in Beijing are generally more stringent, because it's easier in Nanjing to get a local license plate, easier to get a local residence permit in Nanjing. But the thing is, in Nanjing, since April 2018, the insurance of online ride-hailing vehicle license was suspended. So overall, it is difficult in both cities, for the drivers in both cities, to get a ride-hailing driver license and a ride-hailing vehicle license. Okay, so this is the policy background. And let's look at how the capital or the platforms react. So the regulatory hurdles laid out by the municipal governments of both Beijing and the Nanjing are obviously a tough call for Didi, for the platform, because the regulations have great potential to reduce the number of drivers in the market, especially
5 minutes,
in Beijing.
please.
Okay. The platform needs to achieve a balance between complying with local government regulations and retaining as many drivers as possible. So what the platform did was that Didi has built up a platform car rental company nexus to accommodate the local license plate requirement. So basically, Didi aligned with third-party car rental companies. And Didi promised to dispatch more orders to drivers who would rent cars from Didi certified rental companies, even if these drivers do not have ride-hailing licenses. And further, to assure unlicensed drivers, Didi has promised that if they are caught and fined by police, because they are unlicensed, if they are caught by police and fined, the fine is about $1,500 to $4,500 US dollars. Didi promised to reimburse the fines. So that's Didi's strategy. So what's the impact on labor? So this platform rental company nexus strengthened labor control or labor precarity. So one thing is it strengthened the debt bondage. Some rental companies have deployed financial maneuvers to trap drivers, such as they may set a very low initial down payment and then charge predatory interest later. And also it increased the rent. So the drivers have to pay 2 rents. So one, the rent for being a ride-hailing driver and a rent for the car, which lead to longer working hours, but lower pay per hour, lower rate. So this is a paragraph from quoted from interviewee. He said, "I start my work every morning about 8 o'clock and drive back home at 1 or 2 a.m. A few hours later, I start my work again. I will take a break on the weekend. It is not a whole day break, I still work on that day, but stop when I earn the rent. Otherwise, the break will make me a loss. When I have a break, sometimes I get together with other drivers for a dinner. Other times I just sleep. So this figure shows between October 2020 and May 2020, the shares of licensed vehicle and drivers on the Didi platform both increased significantly. And this figure shows that the share of drivers who rent or rent to own a car increased in Nanjing significantly between 2018 and 2019. So more drivers start to rent car instead of own a private car, because private car, they can only be licensed by using a rented car. And so this figure presents drivers' work time by vehicle ownership and the survey cohort. The overall, the pooled data show that on average, ride-hailing drivers worked 65 hours per week. The 2019 Nanjing cohort on average worked the longest, which is 66.7 hours. And our statistics reflect effective labor control in the form of lease or debt relationship. For all cohorts, drivers who had either a rental or a rent-to-own contract worked significantly longer hours than those who worked with their own cars. For example, in both the 2019 Nanjing cohort and the 2019 Beijing cohort, drivers who steered a rented vehicle worked 81.3 hours per week in Nanjing and 84.3 hours per week in Beijing, which are significantly longer than drivers who steer their own private cars, which was less than 60 hours per week. So overall, drivers who worked with a rental or rent-to-own contract, which was about 30% of all the drivers, accounted for 80% of the total hours worked. So 30% of drivers worked 50% of the total hours. And the last figure, this figure shows there is an inverse relationship between individual drivers' monthly work hours and their hourly income rate. That is, the more hours worked, the lower the driver's hourly rate. And this is because the number of drivers working with a rental vehicle increased. And also during the COVID-19, because there is a massive unemployment, this ride-hailing industry rushed in the number of drivers increased significantly. So that intensified the competition. So the conclusion, the regulations granted qualified drivers and the vehicles legal status, but because platforms profit from charging commission fees from each service, they have the incentives to maximize the number of drivers who provide service suppliers. So they allied with third-party car rental companies, and that heightened job competition and the precarity for drivers. So we argue that the way how regulations shape capital labor relations largely depends on the nature of regulations and the capital's strategies to cope with regulations. And this complexity has raised new challenges to regulators. That's my presentation. Thank you.